This meeting is being recorded. Oh boy, that unsettles me every single time.
It's not even like a comforting, like, hello, welcome to the Special Air Service. Here's your MA5 assault rifle. It's nothing like comforting like that. It's just like, this meeting is being recorded. In
This
case you
podcast
forgot,
is now broadcasting.
like the most annoying boomer voice, like, hey, I'm your text to speech device. In case you forgot which organs you used to hear from. Thank you.
Oh, could you imagine this? Going to a fast food restaurant. I ordered Big Mac. Uh,
Not in this lifetime, I can't.
oh God.
And at the same time, I know I'm going to backpedal. Yes, I can imagine that, and it's horrific. And I don't ever want to imagine going to a fast food place with that voice.
Ew.
Oh my God.
I'm just talking about some Karen going out to the desk and saying, "I ordered this medium done."
It's funny. Like, it's. Can you imagine? Like 30 years in the future, everybody stays at home all the time, and then you have robots go be Karens for you, and the fast food
Oh,
place served by robots. So the robots are like, I can't get a break. I'm tired of working a full-time job. Why can't we have the humans do it? I don't know, beep boop. And then the robot Karen walks in like, this is not what I ordered. I don't want to pay $4.25 for a Big Mac. F you. I can't take this stress. Get out of my store. Oh, you're saying that because I am a pink robot. No. Actually, yes, I am. Get out of my store. It's just not. That'd be funny. Actually, it's funny. I just thought of this story. This is actually a real story, though.
can I do
That,
the intro first?
yes.
And welcome, one and all, on YouTube and in podcast land. You are listening to the Tangent Kings. I roll it. Welcome once again to the Tangent Kings podcast. I am, of course, your humble servant, G. Michael Francis. And I'm here with my partner in crime, Mr. J.J. Benks. How you doing today, sir?
So anyway, the story. My friend was at this pub, and it was in the Brooklyn. I believe it was Brooklyn Park. He said he was at this pub. You know, God rest his soul. And no, he's still alive. And anyway, so he's at this pub, and apparently this lady walks in and she orders this whiskey of some kind, like this particular kind of whiskey. And the bartender says she orders it and doesn't drink it for like a solid hour. And then the bartender, gets her tab, and she's like, "How much is it?" And he's like, "It's $4.25," and that's all she ordered. Like, nope, that's too expensive. I can't pay for that. I don't want it.
Buy for a shot of whiskey. That's not bad.
Which is what my friend said. And the bartender's like, okay. And then the lady just leaves. And it's like she didn't drink it. And then so he kind of just looks at this drink. He's just like, he walks over to my friend. It's like, so you want a free glass of whiskey? And my friend says, what kind of whiskey is that? He says H&P. And I'm like, nah, I mean, even for free, I wouldn't even drink that. And the bartender is like, I can't even get rid of it. So he just walks over and pours it out. And he says, I don't feel sorry about pouring that out.
I've never heard of H&P, but
yeah, and apparently I hadn't, and I won't be buying it ever.
Yeah. All I know is there's this. I still can't remember the name of the brand. It's like Tennessee Made or something.
You tell
They
me about
made.
that.
Yeah, but there was this cinnamon whiskey, and it was the most god awful stuff I've ever drank. It tasted like Satan's piss. That's.
You sound like you know from experience.
I was about to grace that with an answer, then I thought about it for like half a second.
You're speechless. Yes, I know what Satan's piss tastes like because I've had this Tennessee whiskey. That becomes part of their branding label 10 years later. Don't ask where we got it from because you don't need to know.
You don't need to know, and trust me, you don't want to know.
If you did, you wouldn't buy it. So we won't tell you what it is. I got another story for you, Mike, and for the listeners.
Really shoot.
Right, really wanted to. I don't have a cute little segue to hop into this, but I don't care. I wanted to share with you guys a little story of something that's fun that happened this past week. So, me and my friend, the same one who told me the story about the H&P whiskey. So we decided to go to antique stores this past day in a town where we live nearby. And so we were like, okay, let's go to these antique shops and then let's just kind of just see what's in there. I'm on a mission. I tell him, I said, okay, this, my friend, is what I'm looking for. And he's like, what are you looking for? And I said, I'm looking for old pipes. And I said, do you think you're going to find those? And I'm like, I don't know, but there are 3 antique stores around here, and I'm going to try to find at least one pipe to get. And so we stop in the first store, and I walk in, and then on the left, I see some vintage wrapped up Civil War coins. I'm like, that's cool. Don't need those. And then I keep walking, and then on the right, I see, oh my gosh, not only this old 1930s farm equipment, there's also a scythe. And I'm like, I've never seen a scythe before. It's got the 2 handles, and you hold it at your hip, and you make a swinging motion, and then people would harvest crops like that. I'm like, that's cool. Definitely don't need that. So I brushed that aside, and I kept looking. And lo and behold, on the shelf, I do happen to see not only I see 3 pipes, I see them on a rack with a humidor on it. And I'm like, how much is that? Maybe I could pass on that, but let's see how much it is. $35, sold. Bought that, wanted in the next store. And then my friend says, okay, now you've got your pipes. What are you looking for next? And I said, I'm looking for tobacco tins. I'm like, you're not going to find any tobacco in there. It's like, I know I won't, but I'll be damned if I don't at least try. So we go into the next store, and I see on the left, I see some World War II memorabilia. And I'm like, okay, so there's a World War I helmet, a doughboy helmet. There's a German soldier helmet from World War II. There's a big red 1 helmet, like an authentic one. I'm like, that's cool. Want that, can't afford that. Going to the right, I see some old fans. Skip those. And then right in front of me, I see a tin. And specifically, and I'll hold it up to the camera, I found this tin.
Mm-hmm.
And now, Mike, have you ever heard of a brand called Dill's Best?
Never heard of it.
Neither have I. And I go there, and it's in a stack of these tins, and I'm like, well, I'll at least just see if I can, with these tins, I'll just get one because it's a fun display piece, right? And so I start popping these open, just saying, maybe I can smell some of the old tobacco. And I pop this one open, and poof, and I'm like, what's that in there? And then my friend looks over, it's like, that's tobacco. And I'm like, I found a tin that is thrice my age, at least, and it still has half the tobacco in it. And I'm like, can I still smoke that? And my friend's like, if you might be able to. And I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? Like, that's probably got all kinds of like hepatitis and horrible things that happened in the 30s in it, but okay, let's smoke it anyways. I go up to the register to pay for it all, and I say, can I smoke this? And, the guy there says, yes, you can smoke this. In fact, you can not only smoke it, you can just rehydrate it. And then it's, how do I rehydrate it? And then my friend steps in, I can show you how to do that. Take 3 orange peels, put them in there, seal it up, and then leave it for about 48 hours, and the tobacco will rehydrate. I'm like, there's no way, but I believe you. And then so I come back, the orange peels are all shriveled, and this stuff feels like it's brand new. I look up the brand, and not only was Dill's Best a very popular brand many years ago, it has a very soothing tea and almost a fruit flavor to it, which complemented the orange peels very nicely. And I found out that not only is it supremely easy, in fact, to actually smoke and scoop up into a pipe bowl, as I puff it now, it's got a very excellent flavor to it as well. The tagline said, man's comforter and companion for over 300 years. And I'm like, I should put that quote on my wall. So anyway, I found that, and then I also found this blue wool Air Force jacket that was probably from the 60s for about $45. But yeah, so that's what we found at the antique shop, and it was a blast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I always wanted to do, but I never got around to is browsing antique shop. Yeah, I mean, I browsed thrift stores many years ago, and I actually got a Marine Corps um, Service Alpha jacket.
You did?
Yeah, many years ago. But
You still have
yeah,
it?
I think I still have it around here somewhere, but I'll probably pull it out. But I remember taking the chevrons off of it, and I actually dressed up as like a Russian crown prince one year for Halloween.
Did anybody get what you were trying to do without them you telling them?
A few.
Hey, all right. Got some intelligent friends.
Yep, but of course, a couple people thought I was a Nazi officer, which wrong country, wrong war. Uh,
I wore my Russian greatcoat, and it's like, even though we've beaten the comrade, we've beaten the fascist pig, but even still, even though we won war, we still get confused for the enemy. Yet.
short. But pretty much the limit of my Russian.
Спасибо, Thorlo.
Вечная память.
The my accent's probably not the best, but it's not terrible, and it sounds good enough. But anyway, so obviously we talked about antiques and some costumes that you did for Halloween. But Mike, you were telling me a little bit before in the show that we were gonna talk about a couple topics you wanted to mention. So I've taken up enough time. Why don't you tell me a little bit about something you want to talk about?
Well, I figured we'd start with a topic that you had showed me just this past week. It had something to do with the January 6th riot.
Yes, actually. Okay, so we'll talk about that first. So what? So Mike, did you watch the segments that I sent you? Correct.
Briefly, I was
Okay.
able. I mean, I was up at a family outing this weekend, so I've been sort of bouncing around with that.
Okay, so I'll kind of clue you in on the videos that I was watching and researching on this particular subject, and then we'll kind of take it from there. So, as many of you know, I am a listener of the podcast of the Lotus Eaters with Carl Benjamin. He used to run a channel called Sargon of Akkad, where he would talk about political and cultural things. And kind of mostly just kind of break down a lot, trying to make sense of the nonsense that is mainstream narrative and conventional opinion on many subjects. So, needless to say, this past week, they were talking about how evidence is starting to emerge that how much and to what extent the FBI's involvement was in the Capitol riots on January 6th. For those of you who do not know, or maybe haven't been following the media super closely, you're not missing out. Back on January 6th, there was a large group of Trump supporters and people dressed up as Trump supporters that marched on the Capitol. It's just, it was a peaceful protest is what had happened. There were a few elements that had turned violent of it. And they actually were allowed through barricades by the police for some very odd reason, and they walked into the Capitol buildings specifically, and a couple of them very extravagantly dressed. One guy had a buffalo hat on and was tattooed head to toe with
Yeah, wasn't he like a Viking shaman or something?
Something like that. The guy's nuts.
I know, but I just remember, and I think I've mentioned this on the show before. I found this article said, the dangerous ideology of Christian nationalism on the rise.
Yeah.
And the picture was Viking shaman.
Yeah. I think he was a former BuzzFeed journalist of all things, which is like, that's weird. It's like the irony comes full circle, and that definitely did.
Yeah. So it made a bit more complete circle than Psaki did.
Yes. Let's circle back, but actually circle back. It's like, oh my God. So anyway, so they got into a lot of the Capitol buildings, and they, a couple of people went in Nancy Pelosi's office, for example, and were inside the rotunda, I believe it's called, and were messing around with the flags. There were a couple windows that were knocked out, and then some of the police at other parts put up this fierce resistance against protesters kind of trying to push their way in. One woman was shot by police. That just kind of, and then the people from kind of at that point forward, the media blew it up into something enormous, like it was like an attempted civil war, an attempted coup, when you just look at a lot of the evidence and that was not the case. Obviously, look into it yourself, form your own opinions, but understand.
And I've seen videos where other protesters, when you got some people knocking on the windows, like, no, don't do that, don't do that.
Yep. And those videos themselves are circulating right now, where it was a big group of protesters. They'd stop at the Capitol doors. Only two guys. These two guys got up in tack gear, like they looked like they were SWAT, and they were breaking down the doors. And the audience was saying, "Oh my God, they're Antifa! Stop them! Stop them! They shouldn't be doing that. Someone tackle them." So everyone there was like, "Don't do that," but these two guys decided to do that anyway. So that's what happened on the Capitol 6th, right? They call it the Capitol 6 insurrection. There's all manner of people trying to spin it in 1,000 different, or many different ways, but mostly it's a way to completely. It was an effective means of political maneuvering that effectively discredited Donald Trump and his supporters.
Right, and now we have the January 6th Commission.
Yep.
Which is a 9/11 style. Which, it's funny. They say, it's this. We're going to look into how political rhetoric influences this kind of behavior. Okay, so Bernie Sanders' rhetoric is also on the table, I take it? With that nut who decided to shoot up that dugout a couple years back. You think we forgot about that? I don't think so. And I'm not saying that Bernie Sanders is responsible for that one wacko. I'm just saying, if you're going to look into it, then look at it from both sides of look at it on both sides.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because you noticed the double standard there, right?
Oh, duh.
Of course.
That's why I brought it up.
Of course. Well, you notice with that, it's if it's effective propaganda, it'll be, or if it's the narrative, whatever it is, it's going to be absorbed, taken, and spun repeatedly until the people that actually listen to the propaganda networks, they'll keep spinning it until everyone believes it's part of your sense of history, right? Oh, I lived through this horrible thing. Anyway, I just mentioning that's what kind of happened on January 6th. Like I said, please go do your own research, formulate your own conclusions with that. But I mentioned that specifically because there's evidence emerging, like I was saying earlier, that the FBI was actually involved in this. In fact, and I mentioned the Lotus Eaters earlier. They did a segment on this. Just search podcast of the Lotus Eaters. It'll be on their, what today is June 22nd. I think it came out around June 15th, June 16th. But the FBI involvement in the Capitol air quotes insurrection. That's the title of the video. And they took this clip from Tucker Carlson, and they also took this guy. His name is Chris Morris, I believe his name. He's the guy that created the IT crowd. And Tucker talked about it. And then Chris Morris talked about it as well. And Chris Morris had this really interesting piece where he said that what the FBI, especially since 9/11, has had this tendency of doing was that they would, in effect, create a plot, a conspiracy plot to overthrow the government in some ways. They would come up with one, and then they would say, we are going to find someone desperate enough or crazy enough to pretend or be influenced to take the reins of this plot, and then we're going to surround that person with FBI agents, and then as soon as they sort of reach a critical mass point, we're going to arrest him and throw the book at him. So in effect, what the FBI...
So it's entrapment.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is illegal.
Of course, they are participating in committing a crime, which is a line the FBI should not be crossing. And they had in the past, they hadn't crossed that. But there's a difference between, how do you put it, being an informant for terrorist plots, and there's a difference between that versus participating in it or encouraging someone to commit a crime. And for example, a lot of times when you look at some of these plots, for example, do you remember, Mike, do you remember the Gretchen Whitmer?
Yeah, that whole the kidnapping plot.
Yeah,
I vaguely remember it.
So apparently the whole plot was that apparently a bunch of guys who were claiming to be right-wing terrorists or extremists or something, they wanted to show up at her vacation home and kidnap her, throw her in a van and drive off. Well, apparently the guy behind that was some random homeless guy.
Yeah, I heard something briefly to that effect. I'm like, wow.
And everybody else there, half of the people involved with it around him were FBI agents.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the FBI, I believe it was about a year, 2 years ago, before January 6, 2020, had announced that they were trying to infiltrate as many, I believe it's as many right-wing groups as they possibly could, specifically the Three Percenters, which is one group. I believe the Proud Boys as well, and it was also the Oath Breakers. Oath Keepers, that's what it was, yeah. So they already expressed this. My whole point with mentioning all this, and like I said, this is my present understanding. I'm not an expert on any of this. This is new information to me. But what it seems to be is that the FBI has this perspective that there are sleeper cells of terrorists in every single city in the United States, and that they go out and find them. And if they don't find any, they create them. And it seems,
which is kind of funny because you got all these last year, the Summer of Love, when Antifa, BLM were burning down like at least half or quite a few of our major cities. It's like, no terrorism here. Yeah, no violent stuff going on over here. And just like that one reporter who's saying, this is a mostly peaceful protest, as he's standing in front of a burning car.
It's funny. Mike, do you remember that segment we talked about several episodes ago, where they're talking about BLM defunding the police in Minneapolis, and then the guy heard gunfire when he was gunfire broke out? Same kind of irony. It's like,
but no, this department is now the number one priority of domestic terrorism is combating white supremacy.
The boogeyman.
It's like besides the Capitol riot incident, which was not white supremacy.
Well, I don't remember who pointed this out. Someone pointed this out. It wasn't me. A couple days ago, but it's funny how people talk about. You heard of the term Juneteenth, right?
Yeah, that's a holiday that's been celebrated in Texas for many, many years.
Did you hear about? Let me ask you this honest question: did you ever hear the term Juneteenth before this year?
Yeah, a few times.
Okay. I hadn't. I was like, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's when the Emancipation Proclamation was read in Texas.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
I'm all for making that a national holiday. I think it's something that should be celebrated. But the effective end of slavery in the United States.
I think it was Lotus users that pointed us out too. They said, "Well, that's a Republican holiday."
It is
because the Republicans ended slavery.
The Republicans were always against slavery. It was the Democrats that were for slavery.
And then it was also them that pointed out, and this is the point I was going to make, was that it's ironic the party that was pro-slavery, the party that was pro-racism and has historically opposed any pro-equality among, just getting rid of racial discrimination in the law, has continued its trend, but instead of saying let's stop being racist, let's just be racist to white people. Yeah, let's do that. And so the trend continues.
Just racist against against white people. I still think that the Democratic Party, in some ways, is still racist to black people.
Oh, it is absolutely.
With this adoption of especially critical race theory, which basically says, if you're a black kid growing up in America, then you're disadvantaged. The system is rigged against you. Lean on us for support. Let
us speak on your behalf, otherwise we'll threaten you into silence.
Exactly. And, you want to speak for yourself? Okay, fine, Uncle Tom. Which is kind of ironic because Uncle Tom was actually the hero of that story.
Yeah, Candace Owens pointed that out. I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't read this book.
Anybody who got a grade higher than a C plus in ninth grade English or literature or whatever.
Well, these people, it's interesting you say that. Maybe a lot of them didn't. Um, but I think with it, when it comes to not just activists in general, but this kind of Marxist cultural, critical race theorists, social justice warriors, people who kind of fit under the umbrella of neo-Marxism and militant Marxism, the people that fit under this umbrella, in order to keep sustaining that momentum and have that kind of hatred based out of deliberate intentional ignorance, you have to shut off your brain to a lot of information, and you really cannot think outside this small cardboard box world, because if you do, you probably wouldn't be a Marxist, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just need a little comprehensive list of people that were lifted out of poverty due to socialism, and I can name a few off my hand. Let's see: Lenin, Stalin, Mao,
Mm-hmm.
Pol Pot. Catching a trend here.
Yeah.
Chavez. Who's it going? Maduro, Guevara. Yeah, only the leaders get lifted out of poverty, friends. That is to say, in a socialist economy.
It's funny. Mike, have you ever heard the term businesses exist to make money?
Yeah, a few times.
And people usually, how people usually intend that as a criticism of businesses, or that how, it's so wrong of being a for-profit business.
I've never heard of it used as a critique. I've just heard it mainly used, one, as a matter of fact in defense of a free market system.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've never really heard it used as a criticism.
Well, here's the thing that I'm learning in the audio tapes that kind of I listen to during the day as well. I think it was Earl Nightingale that had pointed this out. He was a success speaker many, many years ago. And he kind of he described business like this. He said, people are exchanging the value of, for in this case, it'd be the value, like currency, which is also, in effect, it's supposed to represent just a store of value. So you trade a certain amount of value in currency for a good or a service. It's a trade. It's a negotiation. I will provide you a service, and in exchange, you'll provide something of value to me. So we're both exchanging and benefiting from a beneficial trade of value. Mm-hmm. That's something we both want, and it's completely willing. The Marxist critique is that anytime anyone has money, it's because they stole it, or you're taking advantage, you stole it from the poor. When it's like, okay, Marx, listen, buddy, I know that's how you get your money, and that's how you got your money, right? But everybody else has actually earned their income. They've earned, it's not that they've made money. They're not money printers. They've earned their money. Not everyone, but most people have. They've earned it in some capacity for providing a service.
Granted, Marx at his death didn't exactly, he didn't have a very high net worth.
Of course he didn't. You know what he did with his money, right?
Blew it.
Marx never really held down a job, and he couldn't get a very effective, or let me clarify that. Majority of Marx's income was provided by Engels, and he extracted it by pleading and begging and nagging his family members and friends who had it, so that not only was Marx and his wife Jenny, they were totally alienated from their families. As soon as they extracted it from somebody and exploited the working class, right, which is the same thing they critique, as soon as they spent their whole lives exploiting the working class, and then they immediately blew it on gambling and alcohol, and they never had any of it. They never prospered it. They made more than the average person. They would, by today's money, they'd be making about $60,000 to $80,000 a year, which is fairly comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
They're making that equivalent, and they kept complaining how money's so terrible. One of Engels' father died. Engels had he was an important figure in Engels' life. I'll put it that way. And the first thing Marks did when he messaged him, he said, or he not messaged him, he wrote him. He texted him. He's like, "Hey, bro, sorry about your dad and all. Hey, can you send me some cash? I could really use some cash." On it right after he died, and Engels is like, "Why am I friends with this guy?"
Mhm.
It almost broke their friendship.
It's like, yeah, and free those who believe in a free market are the heartless ones.
I know. We're trying. So I'm mentioning all of that just for example for a particular point, and the point was that if Marxists acknowledged or were aware and allowed themselves to be made aware that capitalism is based on voluntary exchanges that benefit everybody, their whole economic model collapses because they believe that the exchanging of money is purely exploitative. When it's like, it's not other people are exploiting people, it's you are. Cough, cough, founder of Black Lives Matter with my 4 houses, cough, cough.
Well, yeah, co-founder. But I mean, granted, there are instances in a free market society where there is exploitation. I'm not saying that the system's perfect. It's certainly better than the alternative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are people, for example, who will exploit the desperation of the poor, i.e., loan sharks, which, they, I can't remember how much the average was for their interest rates, but but in general, charging really high interest rates alone, just basically using people's just desperation.
Right.
And I find that personally, I believe in a free market system, but I find that absolutely appalling.
Of course.
Yeah, but like I said, no system's perfect.
No. But the alternative, it's what did Churchill say? Like, it's the worst thing in the world until you look at all the alternatives and you realize it's the best thing we have.
Well, I never heard that quote before, but yeah, that pretty much hits the nail on the head there.
Yeah, it was a really interesting observation. I'm like, wow, that's kind of well put.
But although this kind of called to mind something that Pope Francis said recently, and I don't know why, it just sort of stuck with me. He said, I ask you to ensure that humanity is served by wealth, not ruled by it.
Yeah.
And if you go to either extreme, whether it be, the absolute licentious capitalist, where, anything that makes a buck is legitimate, or you go to the other extreme, socialist.
Yeah.
Now, these are extremes that are ruled in some way or another by money.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, the capitalist who has no moral boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the almighty dollar. Whatever brings in the most bucks.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how have you met people that were just out there just to make a buck? Like, how would you like you met people like that, but I think we all have. How would you, when you those people you've personally known in your life, how would you kind of describe them? Like, how you've known them? Like, how would they behave?
In general, grading.
Grading?
Just in a word, the grading. It's like a cheese grater on the side of my head.
Really?
Yeah, it's for crap's sake.
Oh, I think the sound cut out there. You're just saying like
my internet just gave out for a second.
Okay, I'm happy you're still here. So,
but yeah, it's like I know people like that, and I'm not going to divulge names, but it's they walk into they own like all these luxury items, and it's like, oh, well, I'm doing so well. My business is doing great. Will you just shut up for 2 minutes?
Like they have to almost like wave it in your face.
Almost. It's like they're trying to be nice about it, but also,
yeah,
it's,
yeah, it's kind of funny where you can tell usually pretty quickly like about a person, right? Because a person in a lot of ways, what they give off and how they behave is a culmination of their thoughts. And if they effectively get off to proving how much better they are than you, number one, no one likes you. But number two, it's like, you probably don't have a lot of friends. But number three, it's like, you're not really fulfilled.
And in a way, I genuinely pity these people.
Yeah.
Because today's the happiest day of their life.
Mm-hmm.
All downhill from here.
Mike, did you ever see that? That just reminded me of a quote. Do you ever see that? So there's this cheesy movie in the 90s called Street Fighter.
I haven't seen that one, no.
So there's this quote where I haven't seen the whole film, but I just saw this one scene. And this chick, her character was Chun-Li. She's like a major character in Street Fighter. And then she's in the room. She's bound and she's in this room with the main bad guy, who's sort of this dictator character named Bison. And she goes on for 5 minutes on how Bison ruined her life. Bison came around and burned her village to the ground. And then when the villagers rallied together to confront him and his army, he retreated. And then instead of fighting them hand to hand, he just retreated, had his guy shoot, very cowardly, shot all the marauding villagers, and then kicked her dad in the face. And then, started gloating like how awesome he was and kind of thing. And she said, "You are just this sniveling little coward of a man, and you're pathetic, and you ruined my life." And then Bison the whole time is like in his bathrobe, making her a drink, and he just kind of looks at her, listening attentively, and he's kind of just like rubbing his chin like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that." But then he turns around with his drinks made, these 2 Bloody Marys, and then he says, like he's scratching his chin, so, "I'm sorry, I don't remember any of it." And she's like, "You don't remember any of it?" And then he walks over to her, hands her the drink, and he says, "For you, the day Bison graced your village was the greatest day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday." And I'm like, that reminded me of that quote, and it's like, that's a freaking amazing quote, man.
And totally unrelated, but they don't call us the Tangent Kings for nothing.
No, it just popped into my head, and that's what we say.
Yeah, and I've just lost track of what are you cackling about?
This is funny. It's like, hey, random Street Fighter quote, pop in there. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah, it's like, okay, where do we go from here?
We could talk about how great how about this? Mike, have you been reading any interesting books lately?
No, actually, I haven't been able to do much reading lately. I've been really busy.
Squidward. No books?
Well, I have on seasons and I have off seasons. Give me a break here.
All right. Well, you do have a growing family, so I will throw you a bone, but just this one time.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is
your father's very disappointed in you, son. Very disappointed.
Let's see.
Give me some photos of Spider-Man, okay?
That would be the 5th time you've told me that.
How disappointed we are that we don't read, that you don't read.
No, that you're gonna throw me a bone this one time.
What can I say? You keep sending me Spider-Man soldiers pictures, and then I might pay you an extra nickel. That's all you get, Parker. 1 nickel. Get me more photos. John Jonah Jameson here. When was the last time you had a pipe?
What was that?
When was the last time you had a pipe?
Right here.
You haven't smoked it, though.
No, well, partly because my kid is in the next room.
Ah, fair. Fair point. But to kind of maybe, to segue this back or kind of circle it back, actually, like what we were talking about earlier, I mean, I was going to ask you, Mike, I mean, would it surprise you, or maybe listeners, please shoot us a text or a comment what you think, but I mean, would it honestly surprise you if you found out that the FBI was actually behind a lot of these major terrorist plots we've had for like the last 20 years? Seems like. I mean, does that surprise anybody? Like, does anybody find that hard to believe?
I would say the last 10 years, most.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like, I'm not saying
I'm not one of those people who will say 9/11 was an inside job. As a matter of fact, the last person that told me that, I almost punched him in the face.
But I mean, like, does it? And I'm not necessarily saying that they're this universally corrupt and they've always been this corrupt organization, but I guess just, does anybody find it hard to believe that they could do something like this?
I mean, I don't find it hard to believe that they could, like, they have the capability and maybe even the gumption. Um, but I honestly, I need more. Me being me, I need more solid evidence, and
Have a dance.
evidence. My God, I'm turning into Matlock. Uh, but from what I could see from Tucker Carlson's clip, he seemed to jump from, we have subjects, what's the word he used? Unindicted individuals named person one, person two, therefore FBI. So I need a little bit more than that. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Because he said, and obviously, you have to, do your own research, but he was saying that if they are, that they have no problem indicting some people, but other people, we know who they are and they haven't been indicted and they're not named. Mm-hmm. It's like, what other conclusions would you draw? I think that it sounded like that was the point he was making.
It's possible, and I was sort of in a rush while I was listening to it. So.
Right. I think next time I do kind of a bigger segment on this, I should just have video clips that we can actually play in the show. Mm-hmm. Instead of me just, hey, I'll tell you about this, folks, and you can go look them up yourselves. I really should do that.
I'll see about adding links in the description below.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that's not the only big story that's been making the rounds, although I think that story's been actually pretty old at this point.
Well, what's the big story?
Well, another big story actually comes from my neck of the woods, not in Tennessee necessarily, but in the Catholic world in general.
Yeah.
The U.S. bishops have voted on a document clarifying the church's teaching on the Eucharist. Now, this is only to set a draft ahead, so there hasn't really been an official document released.
You mean the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch?
Oh, shut up. This is not the Holy Hand Grenade. Your father was a hamster? Well, mother, but...
Yeah, my dad smelt of... Actually, my dad smelt of today's sponsor, Dill's Best, because this is totally a brand you should smoke, and they're totally still in business.
No, but
wouldn't it be funny? What if we do like little Crowder like skits where we just take old businesses sponsoring our shows and they're not even in business anymore. Anyway, please continue.
Well, like I said, the U.S. bishops are going to be drafting a document which is expected to come out in November. And one of the things that's been going around that is expected, which I've actually been doing some last minute research, and the USCCB has said directly, no, we are not targeting politicians with this. But from what I can understand so far, it seems like there is some language in that document that can be used as grounds to deny communion to pro-abortion Catholic politicians. Which... part of me is like, why hasn't this happened like 40 years ago?
Do those politicians... Well, let me ask you this. This is kind of the big question to me is, say they do this, everything moves forward, they deny communion to them. What do you think these politicians that claim to be Catholic, that are only Catholic in name only, do you honestly... Do you think that they actually care about that?
Well, I mean, there's gonna... they're probably gonna find a priest that's gonna tell the USCCB to screw off. But they did issue a statement of principles, which I found kind of funny. And I'll just go ahead and bring it up.
Sure.
Oh, I did that thing again. Hold on. You actually bring it up first. Then do the screen share. All right. So this is just I'll just show you a couple points in this document.
Okay. Yeah, just kind of give me the Sparks notes of it.
But it's like these guys are claiming to be faithful Catholics. We are faithful to the gospel. You know, this is also coming from the a mentality of, I went to Catholic school. It's like, hey, newsflash, fella. I don't know why that's the line that breaks you. Benks, is there something you would like to share with the class?
Oh my. That's just so. Can we have a clip where it's just you saying that out of context? I went to Catholic school.
Well, my point being though is, I went to Catholic school does not equal master's degree in theology is my point. And you hear this all the time from politicians like Dianne Feinstein, whenever she gets, or Nancy Pelosi will do this too. Whenever they get challenged on, how they're at odds with the Catholic Church, they'll be like, I went to Catholic school when I was a child, or I am a faithful Catholic, and I find your accusation of hate insulting. I don't hate anybody.
Why does Pelosi sound like a female Donald Trump?
Because she almost is. Anyway. And nope. I didn't go to Catholic school.
Listen, stop. Okay.
Yeah, listen,
fake news.
Listen, quiet.
That's it. That's it. I gotta work on my impression. Crowder is a great impression of Trump.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, it comes down to it. They're calling on the bishops to not weaponize the Eucharist, which is it's not about weaponizing the Eucharist, doofus. Now, within the Catholic Church, there's a certain disposition for your soul before you can receive communion.
For your soul.
General rule of thumb is that if you're going to receive communion in the Catholic Church, you should not be in a state of unrepentant mortal sin.
What does the church define as mortal sin, by the way? I mean, more of a curiosity question.
Well, I mean, it's mortal sin is trying to think of a way to put this. It's a sin grievous enough to kill the life of God in your soul. Okay. There are criteria, which I'm blanking on off the top of my head.
That's okay. I'm kind of putting you on the spot too, but that's okay. We can just pull it up on the next show too for sure. But
well, I mean, yeah, I would like to answer this.
Okay.
Because it's really only it's only 3 criteria.
Okay.
So
you look that up and then I'll
Okay, so it's the 3 criteria. It's on the first instance is grave matter. So this the thing you're about to do is, well, not knowledge, that's another criteria, but the sin committed is an action that is deadly to your soul, that separates you from the life it separates you from the life of God. And
so basically
that's only the first criteria.
Okay.
The second criteria is that you have to give deliberate consent to it. So you have to choose to do this action. With the third criteria, full knowledge, you have to be completely aware that what you are doing is wrong and understand the consequences of it. These 3 things, if you have all 3 of these things, your soul is in a state of mortal sin.
So basically what it's saying is that you're deliberately doing something that is against the nature and character of God, that not only offends God, right? And is contrary to his very nature. but not like you accidentally did. It's like I am deliberately doing something evil, wrong, and grossly offensive to God and the Holy Spirit.
Prime example. No, I am a faithful Catholic, and I am so pro-life and so pro-Catholic that I'm going to remove the Hyde Amendment that prevents taxpayer money from going to fund abortion.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, we're going to force religious people to pay for abortion. That's how pro-life we are.
Yeah.
That's how Catholic we are. Because
you're starting to sound like Mitt Romney.
Oh, God, don't insult me on our show, okay? I mean, you can call me a crooked son of a. Don't call me Mitt Romney.
well, even I have sent Mitt Romney walks. It's like I resemble that remark. That's Mr. Son of a. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Senator. I just didn't know what I was saying.
Wow. All of a sudden, this turned into a Mitt Romney dump fest.
My brother and I, years ago, when we weren't terribly concerned about politics, we did this thing. We ripped it off of a Film Cow video. We never finished this video, but basically it was just us saying. I would just be like Romney, and he's like Obama, and I'd be like Romney, and he's like Obama, and he's like Romney, he's like Obama, and that was our political debate.
Throw in Trump and left, and that's today's political debate.
We have the best Proud Boys. I'm kidding, but no, that actually that's interesting because that definition of mortal sin is very specific, and it makes sense.
And I'm just gonna go right out there and say it. And I think, and this is for the good of their souls, that if pro-abortion Catholics should be denied communion. Now, I'm not going to get into the full nitty-gritty, but here's the Spark Notes version of my position on that. I mean, you hear the standard argument coming from the more traditionalist sect. They'll cite Canon 915, I think it is, which says, under it, which basically bars anyone who is in a state of mortal sin from receiving Holy Communion. I'm not going to bore you with that. My take on it is that it's. Thank you. Mm-hmm. My hot take is that it's not that. I get it. The Eucharist is medicine for the sinner, not a reward for the righteous. I get that. It's the fact that they are doing these things and proclaiming them to be righteous. That is what's the problem.
Right. So what you're saying is that I'm doing this and I'm saying it's in with accordance to the Catholic Church and then
no, not even. It's more along the lines of, I know this is against the Catholic Church. Here's why they're wrong. I don't give it. I don't care what the church actually teaches about this.
Yeah.
And we even got this from what is that senator's name? Ted Lieu, I think his name is. Yeah, who's basically said, I dare you to try to deny me communion. To which I say, dear Senator Lieu, is that how you speak to your spiritual fathers?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I was your spiritual father, I'd be giving you a spiritual spanking.
Another quote from the Book of Dadism.
But yeah, that's my hot take, the Spark Notes version. But we are starting to run a little bit low on time. Thank you for pointing that out. Mm-hmm. So, got any final tangents?
No, I think that's kind of it. We covered a lot today. I will ask the audience. We are looking for another topic next week. So if you guys got any suggestions on topics you want covered, please message us, DM us, or put it in the comments, and then we will make the show about that, or we will add that to a topic we will discuss. I should say to the next episode, because we live off of we're providing the service for you guys, and we're very indebted and thankful that you've stuck with us, and we appreciate that a lot.
Mm-hmm. And before we get on to your book quote, I just want to share something. Just one quick little point. Just give me a second.
No, well, I'll just fill the air while you're looking that up. I was no, like I said last week, I quoted "As a Man Thinketh," which is a really good, really good read. I highly recommend it. It's like only like 80 pages, but it's got some really insightful thoughts. I agree with most of it, not all of it, but a lot of it's very helpful. And I got a line from it. It kind of repeats, it kind of takes kind of the main point and kind of restates it in different ways, but it very eloquently puts it. But basically what the whole point of the book is, like, you decide your thoughts and that eventually shapes who you become as a human being. And then my quote will reflect that here shortly. When we get kicked off on that. Once again, the show's been brought to you by Dill's Best, because you should have a great smoke. Please sponsor us, Dill's Best. I could maybe Raycon can sponsor us, and I could just plaster the Dill's Best logo.
Well, yeah, and I was trying to find it, but in 1 John 5:17, this is one of the grounds for the differences between venial sin and mortal sin. Out of the Douay Rheims translation, all iniquity, not inequity, but iniquity is sin, and there is a sin unto death. So in SparkNotes version, all sin is bad, some sins are deadly, which is basically the SparkNotes version. This is venial, this is mortal. So anyway, without further ado, Mr. Benks, what's your book quote?
All right, so let me quote it for you here. So it's a little bit of a longer one, but I'll share it with you. So, quote, a man's mind may be likened to a garden, which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild. But whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. If no useful seeds are put into it, then an abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein and continue to produce their kind. So in another way of putting it is, if you cultivate your garden, the garden will produce whatever's sown into it. It'll grow that. So if you put a lot of negativity or victimization or blame, if you think about that, how nothing's your fault, take no ownership over your life, that's what you're going to see is produce a crop of blame. So from your thoughts lead to your habits. The thoughts cultivate the habits, which result in action and the words you speak. That shapes your whole being. If you cultivate good crops like thankfulness, appreciation, humility, if you think about those things and you express those things, that'll become what you predominantly focus on, and that's what will cultivate in the crop garden of your mind.
Whatsoever a man doth sow, that also shall he reap.
Yes.
Anyway. Well, we'd like to thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the heck out of this video, because that really helps. And without further ado, we love you guys. Pax et bonum!
Hey folks, if you like our podcast, be sure to check us out on Facebook, and also check us out on our podcast platforms, namely Anchor, Spotify, Google Cast, and others you can also find on Anchor. God bless.